morning and welcome everyone. This is an open meeting of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board on March 29th, 2022. We welcome those of you who have joined us today by webcast or dialing into the teleconference. Before we proceed with the agenda, I will note for the record that all board members are participating in this meeting and we are able to hear one another. The only order of business before the board today is a staff recommendation that the board adopt charters for its two new advisory groups, the Investor Advisory Group, or IAG, and the Standards and Emerging Issues Advisor Group, or SEIAG, and to dissolve the PCAOB Standards Advisory Group, SAG, which was established by the board in an open meeting on March 29th, 2021. To present the staff's recommendation, I'll turn to our Office of General Counsel, Ken Lynch. Ken, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Williams and board members. As discussed in the memorandum before you, we recommend that the PCAOB adopt the charters for the new Investor Advisory Group and Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group and dissolve the prior Standards Advisory Group. Consistent with the objectives of enhancing transparency and accessibility through proactive stakeholder engagement and cultivating effective and dynamic dialogue with stakeholders, the new advisory groups would enable the board to obtain essential input and insights from investors and other stakeholders on a variety of matters related to improving audit quality. I would like to thank the personnel in my office who worked on this initiative, and I particularly want to acknowledge the contributions of John Cook, Phoebe Brown, and Matt Golden. I would also like to acknowledge the assistance and feedback we received from the Office of the Chief Auditor and the Office of External Affairs. Finally, I would like to thank the Office of the Chair and each board group for their support and engagement leading to our recommendations today. Deputy General Counsel John Cook will now further frame the recommendation.
Thank you, Ken. Good morning, Chair Williams and board members. Today we present for the board's consideration a recommendation to approve the charter of the Investor Advisory Group and the charter of the Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group, in each case pursuant to sections 101(c)(5) and 103(a)(4) of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, as well as PCAOB Rule 3700. We appreciated the opportunity to work with the board to understand its vision for new advisory groups and to implement that vision in the charters for the new Investor Advisory Group and Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group. There are certain features of the new advisory groups that I would like to ask my colleague, Associate General Counsel Matt Golden, to highlight for you. Matt?
Thanks, John. Good morning, Chair Williams and board members Disparte, Ho, Stein, and Thompson. As you know, on January 31st of this year, the board approved the following three items. One, the establishment of two new advisory groups, the Investor Advisory Group, or IAG, and the Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group, or SEIAG, to obtain essential input and insights from investors and other stakeholders on matters related to the board's statutory mission. Two, seeking public comment on the proposed structures of these two new advisory groups by issuing a public release entitled Request for Public Comment, Advisory Groups, Draft Governance Frameworks. And three, issuance of a solicitation for membership nominations for each group. The board received 23 comment letters on the potential structures of the IAG and SEIAG from a variety of commenters representing diverse views, including audit firms, trade associations, investor representatives, a public interest organization, former advisory group members, former PCAOB senior staff, and other individuals. The two charters before you today reflect modifications that have taken into account the staff's careful consideration of comments received to, one, include the appropriate purpose and scope such that each advisory group has flexibility to provide valuable insight to the board. Two, require membership that allows for participation by various stakeholders and provides for cross-collaboration between the groups and continuity within each group. And 3, provide for transparency. With respect to membership, the SEIAG will have no more than 24 members, and the IAG will have no more than 18 members. Moreover, the terms of members will be staggered to provide for continuity. The advisory groups will have at least one common member to enhance communication and collaboration between the groups. The charters before you today also provide for transparency, including by requiring that, to the extent possible, the activities and meetings of the advisory groups would generally be public. The charters also provide that each group must hold at least 2 public meetings per calendar year. On to dissolution of the Legacy Standards Advisory Group. In the press release announcing the request for public comment and opening the member nomination process, it was made clear that the SEIAG would replace the prior Standards Advisory Group, coincidentally created a year ago today. Should the board adopt the charters we're recommending today, we're also recommending that the board formally dissolve the Standards Advisory Group, which has never been convened and whose charter expressly states that it shall continue until dissolved by the board at the board's discretion. So, consistent with the foregoing, in order to implement the structure, governance, and operation of the PCAOB's advisory group, the Office of the General Counsel recommends that the board, 1, adopt a charter for the Investor Advisory Group substantially in the form attached as Exhibit A to the action memo you've received. 2, adopt a charter for the Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group substantially in the form attached as Exhibit B to the action memo you've received. And 3, dissolve the PCAOB's Standards Advisory Group established by the board in an open meeting on March 29, 2021. Thank you. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ken, John, and Matt. At this time, my fellow board members and I will have an opportunity to make a statement or ask questions to the staff. We'll proceed in the order of seniority, and I will begin. It is my pleasure to chair my first open meeting of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. Today's meeting marks an important next step following the board's January 31st, 2022 establishment of our 2 new advisory groups, the Investor Advisory Group, or IAG, and the Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group, or SEIAG. I support today's proposal to adopt the IAG and SEIAG charters. I also support the dissolution of the Standards Advisory Group. For the PCAOB to faithfully execute its mandate to protect investors and further the public interest in the preparation of informative, accurate, and independent audit reports, it is critical that the board engage with stakeholders with diverse viewpoints, including investor advocates who advance the goal of investor protection that is at the heart of our mandate. Since I started my tenure at the PCAOB in January, I've encouraged all stakeholders to engage with the PCAOB, and I've had conversations with many stakeholders who have shared their perspectives with me on a variety of matters related to the PCAOB's execution of its mandate. These 2 new advisory groups will provide an important forum for stakeholders to engage with the board and will provide us an opportunity to obtain a range of perspectives. Comprised of investors and investor advocates, the IAG will provide valuable investor perspectives on the PCAOB's oversight activities. It's critical to the board that investors and investor advocates have a dedicated forum to engage with the board on our mandate. The SEIAG will also include investors, as well as experts in the areas of accounting, auditing, corporate finance, and corporate governance. Although advising the board on PCAOB standard-setting activities will be a key focus of the SEIAG, the advisory board will also address other emerging issues that are significant to the PCAOB. While each group will have a specific objective, coordination between the groups will be beneficial, especially when agenda topics overlap. Therefore, at least one person will serve as a member of both the IAG and the SEIAG to facilitate effective communication. At the time we created these groups, we published our draft governance frameworks and sought public comment, underscoring the extent to which we value stakeholders' perspectives. I'd like to thank those who shared their views on the frameworks. Your comments were extremely valuable in developing the charters that are before us today. Along with requesting feedback on the frameworks, we also solicited nominees for the advisory groups. Soon we will be announcing each group's inaugural members, and shortly thereafter, our plans for each group's initial meeting. I look forward to interacting with our advisory groups in the near future and benefiting from their expertise. I want to take this opportunity to thank my fellow board members for their contributions to this process and their commitment to advancing the PCAOB's mission through transparent engagement. Thank you also to the staff of the Office of General Counsel, the Office of External Affairs, and the Office of the Chief Auditor, who've assisted in the development of these charters. I will now turn to my fellow board members for any statements they wish to make or questions they'd like to pose to the staff. Board Member Disparte, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Williams. I am too pleased to support the formation of the new Investor Advisory Group and the Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group as set forth in the proposed charters that are before us today. Under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, the PCAOB's core mission is to oversee and promote independent and high-quality audits to protect investors and further the public interest. It is therefore essential that we fully understand the needs and perspectives of investors and other key stakeholders in the financial reporting ecosystem. The board's action today demonstrates our commitment to seeking and responding to input from investors and other stakeholders. Indeed, the framework before us today reflects feedback we have received, including pursuant to our requests for comments earlier this year. The insights that we obtain through the advisory groups will help the board better understand the state of audit quality and the effectiveness of our programs, and will guide us in our standard setting and other regulatory policy decision making. In recognition of the importance of investors to our mission, the Investor Advisory Group provides investors, investor advocates, academics, and others an open forum to broadly advise us on matters related to our regulatory agenda and oversight activities. The Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group likewise provides a forum for investors and other key stakeholders to share their views on our standards and other emerging audit-related issues. As you've heard, in addition to investors, the SEAG, as I'm calling it, will include audit, audit committee, corporate accounting, corporate finance, corporate governance, academic, and other representatives, providing us a comprehensive and diverse array of thought and experience to best guide us. At least one member of the IAG will also serve on the SEAG to facilitate communication between the groups and further enhance the quality of the advice provided to the board. Finally, for both advisory groups, we are emphasizing transparent public proceedings to foster trust and accountability in our policy agendas and deliberations. I am eager for us to stand up these new advisory groups, and I thank the staff, in particular in the Office of the Chief Auditor, Office of External Affairs, and Office of General Counsel. I thank my fellow board members, and I thank all the investors and other stakeholders who shared their perspectives to help frame out the design of the new advisory groups. I also want to thank all of those who have expressed an interest to serve on these new groups. The insights and the advice of those selected will be crucial to helping us best advance our mission of investor protection. Thank you. Back to you, Chair Williams.
Thank you, Board Member Disparte. Board Member Ho, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Williams, for your leadership. I'm delighted to support the establishment of the Standards and Emerging Issue Advisory Group and the Investor Advisory Group. I also support the dissolution of the prior advisory group. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 requires us to convene as appropriate expert advisory groups to make recommendations concerning the content of standards. Advisory groups are also an important mechanism for us to hear from our stakeholders. The establishment of these two advisory groups will inform our ambitious and long overdue updating of our standards. I look forward to receiving their recommendations in the months and years ahead. I am particularly pleased that emerging issues will be an area of focus. The evolving role of technology in auditing and how it will impact future auditing standards warrants special consideration. With increased digitization, adoption of advanced technologies such as robotic process automation and artificial intelligence, elevation of cybersecurity risks, and other market transformation. Providing assurance on financial disclosures prepared by issuers is becoming increasingly complex and crucial to investors. The traditional auditing approach, based on existing auditing standards and best practices, may not be sufficient in promoting public trust of financial information in the not too distant future. As regulator, we have the duty to be forward-thinking when evaluating the impact of technology and data on the future of auditing and proactively address them in our standard setting, inspection, and enforcement activities. Technology is likely to fundamentally change the nature, timing, and extent of the audit someday. For example, auditors will use advanced technology to collect and analyze a massive amount of structured and unstructured data on a more continuous and real-time basis. These fundamental shifts could have significant implications on auditing standards and compliance. That's why I'm thankful for the advisory groups in advising us on these important and strategic issues. In addition, the development and use of emerging technologies in the audit process can have a positive impact on the preparation of informative, accurate, and independent audit reports. For example, robotic process automation software has the potential to streamline the collection of audit evidence by replacing the simple, repetitive, and time-consuming tasks that auditors perform. Such software could make the audit process more efficient. But any efficiencies gained through such technology will only improve audit quality and enhance investor protection if, among other things, the freed up auditor time is spent scrutinizing complex, high-risk areas, areas that require professional judgment and skepticism. I want to thank the PCAOB staff for their consummate professionalism and dedication in the development of the two charters that are the subject of today's recommendations. They are the beating heart of this organization, and I am proud to serve with them. Thank you. Back to you, Chair Williams.
Thank you, Board Member Ho. Board Member Stein.
Thank you, Chair Williams. First, I want to thank Chair Williams and my fellow board members for moving so quickly to establish the PCAOB's two new advisory groups, the Investor Advisory Group and the Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group. These groups will provide important information to the board and our staff to consider, and will help sustain a productive and hopefully continuing dialogue, highlighting the perspectives of investors, public companies, directors, auditors, and academics. I think it's very important that we recruit a diverse set of members for each group. We've had a wonderful set of folks raise their hand and step forward to be members, bringing in very diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences. We don't envision these groups as interest groups. They're going to be sources of knowledge, opinion, and if necessary, criticism brought together to help the PCAOB do its job. The charter of each group lays out the board's expectations, considering the business environment, the financial reporting requirements, and the other complex issues, some of which Board Member Ho just mentioned on technology, very complicated issues that are shaping audit standards for the future. This is not a one meeting job. This is going to be a continuing dialogue. So I hope that the members of both groups will take the long view. Add to that the fact that auditing has become increasingly complex, as I was mentioning, as reporting environments and information systems have grown, and the experience of these individuals, right, as audit committee members, CFOs, accountants, or academics can be of real use to us. The Investor Advisory Committee has an equally important role to play. The PCOB exists, quote, in order to protect the interest of investors and further the public interest in the preparation of informative, accurate, and independent audit reports, end of quote. Listening to investors and robust investor outreach are top priorities for this board. The federal securities laws purposely created a unique relationship between public company auditors and investors. As one former SEC commissioner opined, following the events of the 1930s, quote, the auditor became the surest friend of the investor, end quote. The Supreme Court has also stated that the independent accountant assumes a public responsibility transcending any relationship with the client. So the standardized audit report remains the main communication method between auditors and investors, but this communication is typically only one way. And it is hard for investors whose own interests can differ to contribute to the consideration of public policy, and how we can improve audit quality. So by today's action, the PCOB recognizes the importance of investor views and perspectives in executing its mission to oversee the audit of public companies. The group's charter makes clear the group's obligation to advise the board about investors' views related to the auditing profession, to current regulatory issues, and to other matters arising from the board's oversight activities. We simply cannot fulfill our mission without having investors at the table. Finally, I look forward to the two new groups meeting as soon as possible. Again, I want to thank the chair and my fellow board members for giving priority to standing up the two new advisory groups. And I also want to thank our staff and the Office of the Chief Auditor, the Office of General Counsel, the Office of External Affairs for all their hard work in getting us to this point today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Stein. Board Member Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Good morning, and thank you to all who are joining us. I am very excited to participate in my first open meeting as a member of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, and I wanted to thank Chair Williams, my fellow board members for their collaborative spirit and shared sense of mission in these early days of our tenure. I look forward to working with each of them as well as the PCOB's great staff on the many important issues that will come before us. This is an important day for the PCOB, investors, and our capital markets as we consider the charters for the Investor Advisory Group, the IAG, and I will follow suit from my fellow board member, Dwayne, and calling it the SEAG. I am pleased to support adoption of both charters because these panels will play a critical role in assisting the PCOB in fulfilling its overarching investor protection mission. We will also consider the dissolution of the Standards Advisory Groups, which I support. I cannot overemphasize the value that the IAG and the SEAG will bring to the PCOB standard setting activities. There may be a lingering notion that the PCOB has not been sufficiently focused on protecting investors, but we want to collectively change that perception. Please be assured that the considerable thought that we have put into creating these bodies is not for mere window dressing. It is no accident that standing up our two advisory panels is the first significant action this board is taking. Our goal is for these groups to be comprised of women and men from various demographics and who will have and most instances, decades of experience as investors, investor advocates, academics, auditors from various size issuers, and corporate governance experts. They will be essential to our success as a PCAOB as we undertake standard setting. I'm glad to be going back to the future and that we are reimagining two separate bodies which will be paramount to our success. I'm a firm believer the IAG deserves its own voice, space, and platform. Investors believe strongly in the importance of a separate investor advisor group as it provides an important forum where the board and PCAOB can gain an investor perspective on audit issues where the effects of auditing issues and standards and the board's other activities can be discussed in an investor-friendly parlance that facilitates understanding and feedback. The SEAG will be one of the key vehicles the board will use to gain input and insight into how we should be directing our activities and setting public company audit standards, addressing other emerging issues. We all anticipate learning a tremendous amount during and as a byproduct of these meetings. I know I certainly do. To develop relevant and operable standards and rules that improve audit quality and meet investor needs, as well as the needs of other participants in the financial reporting ecosystem, we must all have input from all relevant parties most impacted by our work and those who otherwise have perspectives and experiences that will contribute to effective standard setting. I am hopeful that, no, I actually am confident that the PCAOB's work as it advances its standard setting agenda will be informed by the breadth and depth of talent the IAG and the SEAG members will bring to our processes. And importantly, I'm equally confident that we will strengthen public trust in our desire and ability to achieve our mission. I close with a thank you to the staff in the Office of Chief Auditor, the Office of General Counsel, and the Office of External Affairs, who have done the hard work to get us to this important starting point. And I must add, I certainly look forward to the day soon, hopefully, where we can gather in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Thompson. Unless there are any further discussions from the board, I would now like to call for a vote on the staff recommendation. Board Member Disparti?
I support the recommendations.
Board Member Ho?
I support the recommendations.
Board Member Stein?
I support the recommendations.
Board Member Thompson?
I support the recommendations.
I also support the recommendations, and thank you to my fellow board members. All votes are unanimous and the recommendations are approved. That concludes the PCAOB's open meeting for today. As there is no further business, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect from the webcast and teleconference.